Good morning. Today is the 18th of October, 2022, and this is the second segment in our anecdote about Columbus Day. When the Second Gulf War started, the one where they blew up those buildings in New York, and the United States had sent troops into the Middle East, there were groups that started to protest the war. They sounded just like the Vietnam War protests, and in that war, those protests were led by communists. There was a speaker speaking here at the university, which is right down the road, and so I went over to listen to him. I believe he was the head of the Black Studies program at the university, although don't hold me to that, it's been a few decades. He had started his speech in a packed auditorium by parading up and down on stage and then announcing to us that the United States was a sham. It was simply a sham. And he went on from there. He sounded just like a speech given by the head of the Black Studies program, I believe is University of Colorado, and somebody had filmed the speech and they put it on national television. The impression was somebody had been passing around debating notes, and the long and short of it, I believe, was to keep the United States from taking over the oil wells in the Middle East. At the entrance to the auditorium, there were tables and there were our pamphlets we were supposed to pick up. And I can't keep too many things here, but I kept some things that were representative of the era. There was the Voices of Opposition, and its head article was written by, I believe his name is Dr. Julian Kuhn, who was the head of the Black Studies program. And he talked about how the white guys were trying to recolonize the world, and talked about, the cultural imperialism and militarism and religious ideology and technological scientism and sexism, and we were supposed to stand up to this. It was sponsored by the African Studies and a group called the Refuse and Resist Movement, and they had their own pamphlet, and it shows a picture of a bunch of young men holding flags and being absolutely beside themselves. They look like they're all ready to tear down the city, and they're doing that in the name of peace and justice. Then there was the pamphlet talking about the idea that we weren't liberating the Middle East, we were occupying it, and that was a bad thing. And the anger of the Iraqi people that we were occupying their country. If you recall, the country was ruled by somebody named Saddam Hussein at the time. And then it led us into other things. If you were a white Christian and male, they would ask you that, and if you said no, then you were to stand up to the Supreme Court of the United States, because the Supreme Court of the United States was your enemy. And they would pull you a little farther, and they would give you such things as the draft program of the Revolutionary Communist Party, with its picture at the bottom of a bunch of arms holding up AK-47s. And then there's the Chicano struggle and proletarian revolution of the U.S. I went over to the Chicano Study building. It's a 3-story block-long building in the center of the campus. It used to be called the College of Economics, and even though I didn't major in economics, it was one of the places where I had spent so much of my school days, along with thousands of other students. You walked into the building, and they would invite you to attend such lectures as how to bring Castro's Cuban socialism to the United States. Let me remind myself that these aren't speakers brought in that are different. These are representative of the institutions there, or at least these two institutions. For our purposes, for the purposes of this anecdote, it's the routine itself. It's the attitude of the people who go out. It's the attitude of the people who lead these guys. It's the attitude of the people who are being led, who go out into the street and protest. And it's our attitude. We're simply hardwired not to be able to stand up to this stuff. The Catholics would call this satanic and diabolic. They would say this is the very definition of what we call evil. We call it the routine of a pimp, and the attitude and their attitude. Gregarious, nonverbal, coercive, and non-negotiable was what some highbrow guy said in reference to the civil rights movement. Gregarious meaning a lot of people, although it actually meant a small group of people getting a larger group to go take to the streets while they themselves went up into the foothills at some 3-star restaurant and let the other people do the fighting. Gregarious, meaning a lot of people taking to the streets. Nonverbal, meaning that they would scream and shout, but words have no meaning. Coercive, meaning that they would throw bombs in the street and set fires. Coercive is about as polite word as it gets. And non-negotiable, meaning you couldn't say the word no to these people. The only way you could respond is an act of violence yourself, and the minute you so much as said the word, they would attack you and accuse you of, well, violence. The routine of a pimp. This anecdote is getting a little on the long side, so let's put another circle on that blackboard, and we'll continue this on the next anecdote.